Hi folks, today we're going to talk Chapter 14, Online Public Speaking. So today we're going to explore different public speaking as an online medium and platform. Since the onset of COVID, we've seen an exponential increase in the amount of remote working and the ability to connect and communicate with people near and far for so many different purposes. So we'll also talk about the ethical dimensions of digital public speaking, talk about synchronous versus asynchronous speaking, and talk about strategies that we can all apply to our online communication. So what exactly is online public speaking? Well, our textbook defines it as digital oratory, which is a combination of conventional, traditional, face-to-face public speaking and the use of digital tools. It's growing in importance, and it continues to impact academia, social connections, and professional context. And now it is definitely an employable skill. So you can see here, we all recall the days of COVID where we were on Zoom calls constantly. But let's talk about some of those different practical applications. The changing landscape of public speaking, if we think about our different social media platforms, we have content creators all over the globe of all different ages and for so many different purposes. And they're employing the use of digital technologies to expand access to communication platforms. Again, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram Live, Facebook, all these webinars on different platforms like Zoom or Google Meet are having an impact on how we connect to and share information. So why does online public speaking matters? Well, it has a global reach, and billions of users can be reached and connected to and for so many different purposes. Digital speaking amplifies our ability to advocate for important issue. And businesses are relying on webinars, conference, and online presentations to connect with customers and with employees as well. And so there are some considerations for digital speaking. Most importantly, what is the purpose? If you are on TikTok, you've got your audience or your genre that you like listening to, or even content creating. Synchronicity. Is something a live, or is it something that is filmed to be rewatched later? Who is the audience? And we'll talk about the difference between discrete and dispersed audiences later in this presentation. Every online speech must have a goal, just like your face-to-face public speeches are to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. So it falls into one of those categories. There are requirements like having a clear message is essential, whether it is a 10-second video, which, by the way, I hear Vine is coming back, or if it is a longer webinar-formed presentation. We also want to make sure that we avoid the sense of vlogging in formal context. Again, if you're on social media platforms engaging for social purposes, that is completely different than that professional public speaking that we're really talking more about in this lesson. So, synchronous versus asynchronous speaking. Those were words we definitely used a ton of during COVID. And I have to laugh because I remember during the COVID days that "you're on mute" was a constant phrase that we were sharing and saying during that time. But when it comes to synchronous or live speaking, it's happening in real time. The pros are there is audience feedback, there are chats, there is immediacy, there's adaptability upon the needs of the specific audience. But the cons are that tech mishaps often happen, and it's a single chance to deliver. And we all know lag time, especially if you've got larger conference calls, are real. And so being aware of that and, being aware of silly things like being on mute are essential to our success. Asynchronous, however, is recorded, and the intention is to be viewed later. So YouTube, posting videos, I love a good TED Talk, and so I think about TED Talks that are reposted and reshared time and time again. There's that asynchronicity factor. The pros are there's ability to edit and re-record. There also can be subtitles added and different accessibility issues that can be addressed. The cons are there are no immediate feedback, and it's harder to gauge some of those audience's needs or answer questions that the audience may have. Discrete versus dispersed. So your Your textbook is going to define these in more detail, but discrete is your known audience. So for example, if I was on a webinar with a nonprofit board, I would know exactly who my audience is. Dispersed, however, is unknown. It's a broader audience. It's like posting something on YouTube. So for example, in this class, I know that my discrete audience is going to be my students who are taking this course. However, dispersed, to make sure that my video is accessible in Canvas, I do have to make it a public video. So someone might be searching for online public speaking and might find my video. Now, tailoring my message to an audience outside of my class can be more challenging, and so that's where that dispersed issue comes into play. So, just like I alluded to, there are challenges with dispersed audiences. A speech is harder to tailor or reference or call specific people to action. Also, when it comes to dispersed audiences, because you're trying to cover so much and you don't know who is going to be listening, there's information overload, meaning the attention getters must be stronger. To draw my audience in, I have to give them a hook right at the beginning. And audience members may ignore, scroll past, skip through, listen at 2 times speed, and so they might miss some of the messages that I'm trying to send. Regardless of the type of audience, it's so important to rehearse online delivery. Rehearse those conditions, especially if this is the first time that you are using online platforms. Test the technology. Trying to wait till the last minute to record a speech, but an hour before it's due, and then not testing these different tools is going to lead to challenges along the way. You want to avoid background noise, poor sound quality, old technology, or just even having too many tabs open. Practice with digital norms in mind and watch examples of effective digital speakers. Good speakers are not perfect speakers, but they practice to make progress. And so when it comes to verbal delivery, enunciation, pacing, pausing is so important. Know that if it's an asynchronous video, it's very likely that your audience will pause their video. So giving them opportunities to slow down, to look at different information is key. Maintaining vocal energy throughout an entire presentation or speech can be really challenging, especially for longer presentations. So keep that in mind. Also consider standing to improve energy. Rehearse with the microphone, record that setup, but that verbal delivery still takes practice, even though the audience might be dispersed and might not be actively engaged with the speaker live. When it comes to nonverbal delivery, thinking about all of those things that we think about in a face-to-face connection is important. Knowing what's visible. For example, I am seated and I know you're only really going to see my shoulders. You'll see my gestures come up into the frame a little bit, but I'm aware of what you can see and what you can't see. Now, facial expressions, eye contact is key. When it comes to eye contact, looking directly into the camera is essential. So right now my screen is below me, but I am looking at the top of my computer where my camera is as much as possible. I'm simulating that eye contact so that it doesn't look like I'm reading the screen the whole time. And so working with your camera, becoming familiar with that piece is going to be essential. Eye contact with the camera equals your audience connection. Facial expressions still need to be there as well. So thinking about all of those things, and obviously body proximity, touch, those are things that we won't be including into our videos, but all the rest we can still be thinking about. Now, background lighting. Now, this looks like a pretty fancy setup. You don't have to have that fancy of a setup. I'm a teacher in a classroom, so you can tell that I am literally sitting in my classroom as I am teaching you this material. Now, ideally, if I was home, I actually have a wall that's that blue color that I used for a ton of videos during COVID. Having a bookcase behind me might be a little bit of a cleaner look, but you really have to just consider what you have available. Clean and non-distracting is really key. Lighting is important. You know, those silly Ring cameras and things like that actually can be really powerful. And being aware of wearing appropriate clothing on camera is also essential. When it comes to visual aids, consider if you actually need one. As an instructor, of course, I'm disseminating information, so I have my slides for you. But you may or may not need those. And something that I didn't do prior to COVID was I made a lot of instructional videos, but I didn't actually include my face in that. And something that I have learned as an online instructor is the power of having those nonverbals, listening to my voice, seeing my facial expressions can be really, really key and help build connectivity and rapport with your audience. So while it's not always fun to have yourself on camera, it is so important to engaging your audience. So expert tip, consider if you are going to use visuals, send them out ahead of time, include them in the chat, give people access to your visuals so that they can see them or access or use them at a different time as well. As an audience, remember, it is your responsibility to engage in ethical communication too. If there is a chat, avoid trolling or adding harmful comments. Keeping the conversation positive, especially in a public forum, can be really powerful. And also, contribute constructively to the digital dialogue. Engage when possible. If it's asynchronous and you can't engage, make sure that you aren't distracted. I liked this picture here where the person is really focused on, there aren't 1,000 tabs open, they're not distracted while they're listening, they're actually engaged in the content. And so making sure that we as an audience are ethical listeners is key as well. So here are some tips when speaking online. If you are recording your speech, film full body if possible, test the camera, wear approachable clothing, ensure proper lighting, and eliminate any interruptions or distractions that you might have. It is so important that we continue to practice engaging in this communicative platform. Digital public speaking is evolving. Always think about the purpose, if it's synchronous or asynchronous, and remember your audience. Rehearsal is still important, and effective digital speeches require intentional delivery. Technology should support, not distract your message. So keep practicing with this platform and know that it is definitely something that is going to be ubiquitous in our world as we know it. So I look forward to seeing your